Good morning. Good morgen. Wie heißt du? Sawadee krap. Satalamakula satia. What am I speaking? Good morning. Languages fascinate me. Countries fascinate me. That's why I always say to you, when you watch, always, if you're comfortable, you don't have to leave your address. I don't want your address. Just your city and country. Because I love to look on the map to see where people are from. I've been blessed to live in many different places, so geography fascinates me. When I was in school, geography was probably one of the most boring, and history. I think history took the case, but I think geography was one. I didn't like geography, I guess because of the way it was taught, you know. And, you know, teaching is an art. I was a teacher. I've done many teaching courses. I did, how many? When I was in the Green Clothes, I went on a course. You do these courses, they're like 7 weeks long. Predominantly it's learning a new vehicle. So there's like 2 vehicles. But you're learning to teach that vehicle. So that the teacher, teaches you how to teach that vehicle. So you have to learn the vehicle, and then you also learn how to teach that vehicle. And they used to be called JDMI, Junior Driver Maintenance Instructor. Then they changed it to DMI, Driver Maintenance Instructor. I must have done, close to 10 of those courses over my time, because you have to do so many courses each year. And I didn't really want to do all. I think my people knew I was good at mechanical stuff, so they always just sent me on those courses. And initially it was fun, but after a while it became a little bit routine. I wouldn't say boring, routine. Learning a new vehicle was okay, but after you just keep learning, but then eventually I went on a RI course, which is regimental instructor. That's for like corporals and sergeants. And if you do well on that, you get asked to go back and teach at the main school. So when I was on my RI course, they came to me and said, "We never do this, but you really have an ability to teach. Would you like to come back and teach here in this school?" It's a military school inside a regiment or compound regiment of many different schools. So it's like the highest level in the military for that topic. So I said yes, because I just love to teach. And so I went back after the RI course. I went back to my unit, and I was called back again. I did another 3-month course. So the RI course is a 3-month course. You do 3 weeks of basic principles, 3 weeks of basic principles, which was, this is a nut, this is a BA nut, this is a BA washer, this is a BA lock nut, to all different kinds of nuts, and then all kinds of split pins and lock washers, and on, all the way up to all different types of engines, all different types of transmissions, different carburetors, different fuel pumps, diesel fuel pumps, electronics, everything for 3 weeks. And then you specialize in another vehicle, 2 more vehicles, and then you teach advanced driving. So I did all that, went back to the school, did a Carter course, which is another 3 months. That's to be an instructor or teacher in the school. Did that, passed that, became a teacher. And because of my childhood, I was a little bit nervous standing in front of a classroom every day. Not nervous because of teaching or because of the people, because I wanted to get it 100% correct. I was my own worst critic. So the normal time you stay there is 3 years. But the first year I spent almost a whole year just not feeling comfortable. And the pressure was, I did it to myself. Nobody else did it. I did it to myself. The second year I started to relax. The third year I really enjoyed. And I asked to stay, and they let me stay another 2 years. And I was still a sergeant then, so I was holding myself back in my career, but I loved what I was doing. And everything I did, I always tried to make myself better as a teacher. And making my own models, like I made models of, the suspension spring, helical spring, or whatever you want to call it, elliptical spring, and with the swinging shackle. And there was a book made by the British Mechanical Society or something, and I haven't found it since. I tried to find it, but it's an amazing book, and it has everything to do with vehicle engineering. And I used to read that because we had a standard that we had to teach to, but this was like, the next level. It was the same, but it was just explained different, and different things explained different. So I read it, the book, not cover to cover. Depending on what topic I want, I would read that chapter. And I read about suspension, and I felt that maybe there was a little bit we're missing. So when I was teaching the RI course, which is the high one, when I was teaching that myself, I would, think, how can I incorporate this? Because we used to teach that suspension would protect you in the vehicle and many other things, but it was bump. So when you hit a bump, it would go up, and then when you hit a pothole, it would go down. But it also, for acceleration and braking, it would twist in different shapes. So when you brake, the back comes up. When you accelerate, it goes down. It twists, so it basically takes all the road and twisting out of it so that you have a smooth ride. That's just one example of many I did. And then I had a flair for electronics, so I went to a civilian technical college and took the third year course on, back then I think it was called Automotive Electronics and Microprocessor Application in Vehicles, something like that. And I did all these different courses so that I could have a better understanding. So the better I understood, the better I could teach. And then we had our own method of teaching. And still to this day, I've seen many different methods of teaching. I'd say that method was the simplest and easiest to do if you could grasp it. Many people it was really difficult to grasp it because you had to have this mind where you could take yourself out, look at something and break it down into a million pieces. Because if you could, everything is simple if you break it down. So if you look, like there was a carburetor called the 48 double NIP, really complicated because it was a carburetor, but it had altitude compensators in it and all kinds of different things. And so when you look at it, it's about this big. When you looked at it, you go, what is that? But if you break it down into each system, and then each system is broken down again, it's really simple. And we used to practice that method of teaching by, like, give somebody a kettle, say, okay, teach that. No idea. Think first, because people want you to help, but you haven't engaged your brain yet. Anyway, I did all that, and then finished my 5 years, finished the teaching and everything. Did many courses. I went and did all kinds of different other courses. But then after that, after the 5 years, I left and went to the School of Artillery and ran the training wing for automotive there. And after doing what I did for 5 years, that was like being on holiday. It didn't challenge me at all, but fun. And I was surrounded by some smart, interesting people who did their own jobs. And my boss was a captain, and they call him the unit training officer, UTO. He said to me, "Sergeant Jeffries," I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "I have no idea what you do. Can you do it? Can you manage yourself and just keep me informed?" No problem. So all I had to do was run courses, get people to pass their basic and advanced driving theory on the mechanical and on driving, and so get people to be able to drive, young guys, young women, guys. And if I did that, everything was fine. And I ran many courses over the, I think I was there, I say 18 months, but I think it must have been longer. I don't know. I think a normal posting's like 3 years, so I don't remember being there 3 years, but if I did, it flew by. So I applied for redundancy because I was desperate to get out. I just wanted to be free. But I asked for redundancy because they wanted to reduce the size of the military. And I applied 2 times, and both times they said, "No way." It's like, well, I remember, I think I said this a long time ago. I was called by the GSM, Garrison Sergeant Major, to go up to outside the colonel's office. And I'm all excited. I'm thinking, yes, I'm going to get redundancy. And I got up there, and he comes up. You know, Garrison Sergeant Major is higher than a regimental Sergeant Major, the position and pay. But so I'm in the redundancy line, and I'm all excited, like I'm going to get out. And he comes up in his big growly voice. I knew him really well. He's a really, really nice guy. And he says, "Sergeant Jeffries." I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "Get over there in the other line." I said, "Is this for redundancy, sir?" He says, "Yes." "Get over there," barking at me. I said, "Yes, sir." So scuttled across and just walked, literally across the hallway, and they got on a different line. So I'm like, what is going on here? I had no idea. So I go in to see the colonel, and the colonel says to me, "Sergeant Jeffries." I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "I have bad and good news for you." I said, "Oh, okay." He says, "You didn't get redundancy." And I went, he says, "But you've been promoted to staff sergeant." I was like, thanks. And for 3 months, I had this grumbly face on and after a while, I was like, dude, stop being so ungrateful. You got promoted. But I was just like, I wanted it out. Anyway, I got promoted and to staff sergeant. And what happened? Where do you send somebody with my career background? So I went back to the school. And I arrived at the school, and you supposed to do the Carter course again. And I went into the classroom, and I'm sitting there with the other students. I was the only one I actually taught in the school already. And the instructor come in, and he goes, "Good morning, everybody." And he looks at me and goes, "What are you doing here?" I says, "I'm on the course. This is my classroom. You're my teacher." He says, "Get out." I said, "What? I got to do the course." He goes, "Get out. I'm not having you sitting in here." So he was going to teach somebody who taught all that already. He goes, "No way, get out." So he kicked me out the class, and I had nothing to do, nowhere to go. So for 3 months, I just wandered around the camp. Well, I knew everybody. And because it's a training environment, it's like you wear green clothes, but you don't have an active war role. So a lot of the positions are staffed by civilians, and I knew the guy who held all the tools. And so I used to go see him in the morning, say, "Good morning, how you doing?" And he'd put the kettle on, we have a cup of tea. Then I go to somebody else and drink tea, and then go to the gym and go back after lunch. And so my job was to hang around for 3 months. But I used to go up to the office like once or twice a day, just milling around you know, I knew everybody. I was there for 5 years, right? Go see Liz, the secretary, and say what you're doing and stuff, and bother people. And one day there was a sergeant major, the QMSI, who's in like the head sergeant major of the wing, and the boss was standing there, and they're talking about being in a predicament. And I said, what's the problem? And they said, we have nobody to take over from Tony Norman, the sergeant major. Of course, is sergeant major. We don't have anybody to do that job. I said, I could do that job standing on my head. And they said, what do you mean? I said, I come up here all the time. The only thing I haven't done is you have to account for rations. Come on. But writing, so you just take the technical objectives, find out how long a course lasts, and you write a course program. How difficult can it be? And as an instructor who taught that for 5 years, I know that the technical objectives are correct. Single period, double period, so on and so on. So the boss said, okay, if you can do the job for 6 months, you'll be promoted to warrant officer. I said, okay. So I wandered around some more, and then I went and hung out with Tony a little bit. You know, what do you do, that sort of thing. And it was like nothing, because I had the experience. So anyway, he left. I took over, because he left the unit, but he was still on like terminal leave. So he's being paid by the Army. So technically he was still in the Army. So I couldn't have the rank yet until he was physically discharged, like out. So eventually he was out. Here's this, look at this. My boss promised me that job. I did it with no problems. Everything was fine. And then he wrote in my report, recommended for promotion, but not yet, which meant he wasn't going to fulfill his promise. So I thought, you backstabbing, deep. But anyway, I didn't say nothing, just kept smiling. So then you have to go see the colonel. The colonel was the Armor Corps guy. Our wing was artillery. In the school there was artillery, engineers, infantry, and armored. All the people who use armored vehicles. That's what we taught, armored vehicles. A vehicles, like anything with armor on it. We did teach the big Fodens and things like that, because nobody else did, but the gun tractors and stuff like that. Anyway, I went to see the colonel and walked in. He goes, he wrote my report, and it was like outstanding. And then he looked at what my major said, who's artillery. He says, what does this mean? Said to me. So he said, Staff Sergeant Jeffries. I said, yes sir. He says, what does this mean? And I read it again. I said, to be honest, sir, I have no idea what it means. I said, I was told if I did the job well, which I did, I would get promoted to warrant officer. And now he's saying not yet. But I have no idea what he's saying. And he said, it doesn't make any sense to me. So he just goes, Jean! His secretary, she walks in, who I knew very well. Really nice lady. She was like a mom kind of lady, but just beautiful spirit. He said, change this to recommended. So the colonel told her to change my major's statement to recommended for promotion, because all the ticks in the boxes were there, but in the verbal, the written part, he said recommended, yes, but not yet. So she just canceled that out somehow. And back then they used all that white tape and stuff, so she typed it all out and recommended for promotion now. So and then he sent it straight to records from his office. It didn't go back downstairs. It went to RA Records, which is the people who man the whole of the Royal Artillery, and infantry has theirs and so on. And it came back 4 months later. Promotions came out. I didn't think anything. Tony was still there, actually. Tony Norman was still there, and I was a staff sergeant now. I had the rank on my arm. And he said, the boss wants you to see it. Take a pen and a paper with you. So I took a pen and a paper with you. I walked in. I said, morning, sir. And the same guy, he says, have a seat. I sat down. He goes, congratulations, you've been promoted to warrant officer. I was like, okay, thank you, sir. And that's how I just left it like that. I didn't say any more, didn't get excited because I didn't really like the guy. And then he told me the other people who've been promoted and to go find them and bring them to his office. So I said, okay. So it kind of was it slowly registered in my head what he said over a couple of days. And I had to wait. So Tony left, had his terminal leave, which is like 3 months or something. So I stayed as a staff sergeant, but once he was out, records changed it, and then I put the crown on my arm. You see that hat I have with the crown on top? That's the same badge. And I took over as courses warrant officer, as a warrant officer, and I was in charge of teaching. I used to teach, my specialty was method of instruction, so how to teach. So I told you this story because it's, to me, one of the highlights of my career. But I was listening to a guy talking today, a young guy, 27 years old, I won't mention his name. He's from the UK, lives in Bangkok now, and claims to earn £35,000 or no, $35,000 per month coaching people on how to be a coach. I was like, dude, are you serious? But I thought, So I've done all I've done, as a warrant officer, I went and did a couple of more courses. One was to do with testing, how to write tests. Another one was, these are 2-week courses, so 2 weeks on how to write a test and then writing tests. And another one was on courses admin, how to run courses. So I'm thinking, here I am, next month, 69. This guy's earning $35,000, living it up in Bangkok. And I was like, dude, with all your experience, you could be like a coach, teaching people how to teach. And with my persona, cheerful, upbeat most of the time, teaching's fun. And when I used to teach, like we'd be in the pit looking up at something, and the method of the teaching would be question and answer, and then you get to a point and you go, what is this? You say, okay, follow that pipe along, and what is it connected to? And then, oh, it's connected to this box. You say, okay, what does it look like it could be? And that, because the question and answer makes them be inquisitive and look and get in, and by doing that, your brain starts to register that there's something there, and then you give them the name. And with all my experience, and he's earning $35,000 teaching people how to teach, or be a coach of some kind, coach, teach, whatever. I was like, with my experience, I could do that like a walk in the park. There's 2 other courses I did that I can remember. 3. One as a staff sergeant I did was from staff sergeant to warrant officer. It was like a 3-month course. One of the most boring things I ever did in my life. It's just head work all the time. You do just a tiny bit of drill, like ceremonial drill. But because you're a sergeant major already, actually I was a staff sergeant or sergeant major? I can't remember. But because you're at that level, there's no discipline, there's no nothing. You just show up, good morning, and the guy starts talking. And it was like one of the most boring courses I ever did. Military law, accounting for rations, so I did learn something. But you know what I found? When the guys finish the course, they go back to the unit, and then when somebody else is going to do the course, they just give them all their notes, here, and they take it away. And so when it's time to homework, they just copy word for word what they put on the sheet. It's the same thing, course after course. I didn't have anybody. I had to do it myself. And so I'm up there at 2 o'clock in the morning every day doing this. And I didn't get the best mark in the world, because military law is really complicated, but I didn't really care. But there's 2 other courses. One was course management, how to manage a course and how to put a course together, how to construct it and all that sort of stuff. And the second course was, another 2-week course, was to do with testing, how to write tests, how to learn if they learned something. So, you know, I learned a lot of stuff about teaching. I don't know how many times I've done teaching courses. Anyway, the point is, if this young guy at 27 can earn $35,000 a month teaching people, I'm thinking, oh, one other course I did, a civilian course. There's 2 types of teaching courses. There's a teaching course to teach children, which is, you need a certificate in education. This is the UK. A certificate in education, which means 2-year course on psychology and so on of young people, how they learn. I didn't do that one. I did a year's course part-time at a technical college. What was it called? It's basically a teacher's course. Certificate in teaching or something. It's City and Guilds, which is a big institution. Teaching certificate, that's it. So I did that. You do it for a year part-time. And I remember the guy who taught me it. His name was Les Walklin. What an amazing guy. He wrote many books on teaching and how we learn and so on and so on. And he's probably passed now. I was 40 and he was probably like 65, 70 then. But really, really, really nice guy and smart. Anyway, I did the course, but by this time I'd already been teaching like 4 years. And he said to me, I can't teach you nothing because you've been doing it too long. So what you're supposed to do is, he's supposed to come in your classroom and assess you teaching, how you teach, and everybody passes it. Because he knows the format and you're teaching to that format. So everybody passes, you know. So anyway, he said to me, there was a lieutenant colonel and myself doing the course as well. And he said to me, and this lieutenant colonel, he says, I'm going to give you, you're supposed to, when you do the course, you're supposed to do the course on a topic that you already know. But he said, because I can't test you on what you know because you've been doing it too long. So he says, I'm going to give you something harder. And he gave me more of a theory than a practical. It was to create a lesson on education and training to do with ISO 9000. So basically, he wanted me to create a story or like a lesson, more of like a lecture, on how education and ISO 9000 or 9001 can relate, so to maintain a standard. I'm like, dude. Well, luckily we had a base workshop across the main street down the road. So I went over there and I asked them to look at all their ISO books. And they're like, who looks at that? It's, you know, it's like watching paint dry. But I read it for hours trying to understand it, and it didn't make no sense. But I got the gist. There has to be a standard. So I did it, and anyway, long story short, I passed the course. But here, if he can do it, can I do it with my knowledge of teaching? I think yes. So I was like, how do you contact people? I don't know that yet. But I'm thinking, should I or shouldn't I? You know, I have my brain saying, part of me is like, I'm turning into a monk where I just do less and less. And I spend more time in here than outside. Like my drain broke. The screw that holds the piece that sits in the bottom of the sink, well, if you go all the way to the end, the water over the years has rusted it, so it fell off. So the drain still works, but the thing's gone. So I got to take the drain apart, put the new thing underneath so the screw can attach it. And I'm looking at it like, I have to do that. But I want to make this video. And then I come in here and there's lizards get up in the rafters at night and poop on everything. So Jan's chair behind me, that chair behind me, covered in it, all kinds of poop. So I clean that. And then there's always something like 1,000 things to do, but you need like a staff of 3 just to walk around and clean everything all the time and keep the ants out the house. And I'm like, when I say about moving, so I'm happy to be here, but like, you want quiet and fresh air. This morning I come out across the river, burning trash, smell of trash burning in the air. A guy across the street wants to trim the whole of his crazy, like, was it 100-meter square plot with not a lawnmower, with a weed eater. It needs doing, I'm sure, but I just want quiet. So I don't think I'm going to find it in an apartment, but one thing, I won't find lizard pooping in a big apartment. Dilemma. So, what's the point? I could teach people how to teach for fun and earn some extra pennies. Do I need it? Not really, but it'd be fun interacting and teaching somebody to learn how to teach. But anyway, I just thought about that. I was like, dude, with your experience, you could teach somebody to teach anything. And, you know, I told you this before about my childhood, which is a mess. So when I found teaching and I really connected with it, and something about it had energies that I didn't understand behind it, but it was like round hole, you know, round peg, square hole, square peg, etc., etc. It's just like, that's my thing. My calling was teaching. I loved it because Mr. Anal loves to, if he's going to learn something, he needs to learn it 100%. One more story and I'll change the subject. On my RI course, they give me a lesson to teach, which was the air braking side. The braking system, yeah, it has a very unique braking system. So when I started investigating this braking system with the manual is like an A4 size book, and you go to the braking system, there's a big schematic that opens out, and you're looking at it and you go, this schematic is wrong for this vehicle. And I kept looking, and I'm looking back in the vehicle, looking at the book. I said, it's wrong. So I talked to the instructor about it. He says, well, what are you going to do about it? I said, I'm going to draw my own schematic. And he goes, do it. So I drew my own schematic. I got a piece of A4 paper and, you know, really thin lines of hydraulic pressure, low hydraulic pressure, light hydraulic pressure, high pressure air, low air, compressor, all that sort of stuff. And it came out really nice. And then I burned it onto a, we used to use that like a film, I forget it was, and you had an OHP, overhead projector and stuff. And then you get the color pens, I forget what they're called now, permanent pens, and you color in the lines of the different pressures, and then you make these flipped things that come over at different, anyway, I made it all, did the lesson, and the students, my students, the guys I was on the course with, so there's 6 on the course. I talked to the other, I think there was 5 of us on the course, and they all said it went really, really well. And I said in the class that I'm going to go just jump out of the format for a second because I want to confirm something. And I said, okay, I'm back, carried on. The assessor, who I didn't like and he didn't like me, gave me a good grade, but not the grade I should have got. And I didn't say this. This is my fellow student said I should have got a higher grade. And because he did that, overall for that course, I missed an A grade by I missed an A grade by 0.25%. And to get an A grade in that school is like a miracle because of the way they mark everything. So I nearly got an A grade. But anyway, everybody complained, all my students complained to the other staff, the instructors and so on. But he alcoholic, so I guess he picked up I didn't like him. Anyway, when I was a teacher, I had, you know, it's very difficult, but this one guy, Pete, I think his name, Peterson, yeah, kept saying to me, I can't do this, I can't do this. And I keep an eye on him at the corner of my eye, said, you can. And he had to teach that carburetor. I didn't make this up. Up in the office gave him the topic. He had to teach the 48 Devil NIP, which was really complicated. But his vehicle that he was learning was the CVRT. It had a Jaguar 6-cylinder gas engine with this carburetor on. And I said, you know, I taught it to him already so he could understand it, but he had to teach it himself. Anyway, he taught the lesson, did all the courses and everything, and he got an A grade. So we had to go see the brigadier, and he got his certificate, and, you know, Kevin marched in, hello sir, this is his student, he got an A grade. He knew why he was there. So my claim to fame, I got one student with an A, and I missed an A by 1/4%. Anyway, memories and a good time. So the story is, could Kevin teach somebody to be a teacher, or teaching something, how to teach? And then you can take that off in your social media and teach people. But I'm just laughing to myself while I say that, because most of my audience are my age, and all they're concerned about is, how can I get to Thailand and drink a beer? Okay, guys. I'm now going to finish the bird aviary. I'm going to put this camera away because it keeps turning off. It's getting hot. And I'm hot. So, have a super blessed day. Mr. Monk says, buckets of blessings, rivers of peace, joy, and kindness. Have a wonderful day. All the very best.